The rain was coming down in sheets, the kind that soaks you to the bone before you even feel it start. I stood there under my black umbrella, staring at the polished oak casket, mud clinging to my heels like it didn't want to let me go. 42 years of marriage, of Sunday pancakes and whispered secrets, and now Ernest was down there, or so I thought. My phone buzzed. Hard. Right against my heart. I fumbled it out with gloved fingers, expecting some distant cousin's condolences. Instead, the screen glowed with words that stopped my breath. I'm alive. Not me in the casket. Don't trust our sons. I swear the world tilted. The priest's voice faded into a dull hum, the mourners' black umbrellas blurring into one dark wave. My knees buckled. Someone, maybe the funeral director, grabbed my elbow, but I barely felt it. All I could see were those words, burning brighter than the lilies wilting beside the grave. Ernest's number. His old flip phone, the one I'd tucked into his suit pocket myself, for the road, I joked through tears. How? I shoved the phone back into my coat, pulse racing like a trapped bird. Across the plot, Charles and Henry stood shoulder to shoulder, faces carved from stone. My boys. Once upon a time, they'd had grass stains on their knees and jam on their chins, begging for one more push on the tire swing. Now, Charles adjusted his cufflinks, eyes flicking to his Rolex. Henry stared at the hole in the ground like he was already calculating square footage. I forced my legs to move, one squelching step at a time, until I reached the limo. The driver held the door. I slid in, clutching that message like it might vanish if I blinked. The door shut with a soft thud. I typed with shaking thumbs. Ernest? 3 dots danced, then nothing. The ride home was a blur of wet windows and wipers slapping time. Maplewood Drive looked smaller than I remembered, the porch light flickering like it knew something I didn't. Inside, the house smelled of lilies and lemon polish, too sweet, too clean, like someone had scrubbed away every laugh, every fight, every midnight snack raid. Charles poured scotch without asking. Henry checked his watch, already late for some downtown closing. They hugged me stiffly, promised to handle everything, told me to rest. Rest? With that text clawing at my ribs? I waited until their taillights disappeared down the street, then locked every door, poured myself a finger of Ernest's favorite bourbon, the one he'd hidden behind the good china, and dialed the number back. It rang once. A man's voice, rough as gravel. Mrs. Hayes. Who is this? My voice cracked like old paint. Name's Carver. Private investigator. Your husband hired me 3 months ago. Said if anything happened to him, I was to contact you the day of the funeral. I sank onto the kitchen stool, the one Ernest used to spin me around on when the boys were little and the world was simple. He's alive. A pause long enough to swallow the room whole. No, ma'am. I'm sorry. Ernest passed 2 nights ago. But the man in that casket, his breath hitched. Ain't him. The glass slipped from my hand. Bourbon pooled across the tiles like dark blood. Carver talked fast, voice low, like the walls might be listening. Ernest had grown suspicious after a string of accidents, brakes that felt too loose, exhaust fumes that shouldn't have been in the garage. He'd noticed Charles and Henry asking too many questions about life insurance, about the shop's valuation, about my own policy. So he'd hired Carver to watch, to record, to dig. They poisoned him, Mrs. Hayes. Methanol in his evening whiskey. Slow enough to look like liver failure, fast enough he couldn't fight back. Then they staged the car crash to cover the traces. My stomach lurched. I pressed a fist to my mouth, tasting bile and bourbon. The body, John Doe from the morgue. Dental records swapped. Easy when you've got money and a coroner who golfs with your son's firm. I closed my eyes and saw Ernest's hands, those calloused, gentle hands, wrapped around a glass that killed him. I saw Charles laughing at some boardroom joke while Henry signed the forged withdrawal slips that drained the shop's accounts. I saw them planning my own accident next, because a grieving widow asking questions is messy. Carver sent files that night. Grainy audio of Charles saying, once mom's gone, the estate's clean. No loose ends. Bank transfers time-stamped the day Ernest died. A burner phone photo of Henry buying methanol from a clerk who looked away for the right price. I sat at the kitchen table until dawn, the house creaking around me like it mourned too. When the sun bled pink through the curtains, I made coffee I didn't drink and called Sergeant Ruiz, the detective who'd once chased my boys on bikes for stealing peaches. She listened without interrupting, then said, "Bring everything. We'll take it from here." The arrests happened at noon. Charles was yanked from his corner office, Tiasque, shouting about lawsuits. Henry collapsed in the driveway of his glass-walled condo, sobbing into hydrangeas he'd never learned to water. But that was just the beginning, because the trial? Oh, the trial was a storm I never saw coming. And what Charles did in that cell afterward? Well, that's a shadow I still carry in my garden dirt. The courthouse smelled of bleach and old coffee, the kind that sits too long in a styrofoam cup. I walked in every morning for 6 weeks, spine straight, clutching a folder thick with Carver's evidence like it was Ernest's hand pulling me forward. The bailiff called it Case 47V, but to me it was the day my boys stopped being boys. Charles sat first chair, suit pressed sharper than a switchblade, eyes scanning the jury like he was pricing real estate. Henry wouldn't look at me, just stared at his polished shoes, knuckles white around a legal pad he never wrote on. Their lawyers, 3 of them, ties costing more than my first car, kept whispering grief manifests in strange ways. The prosecutor, a woman named Patel with a voice like warm honey over steel, started with the whiskey glass. Lab techs had pulled it from the wreck, shards still smelling faintly of oaken death. Methanol levels high enough to blind a horse. She held up the bag, let the silence stretch until the jury shifted in their seats. Then the recordings. Carver's voice crackled through the speakers, time-stamped the night Ernest crashed. "Charles, Dad's liver's already shot from the bourbon. A little extra kick and the crash writes itself. Henry, softer. Mom'll sign whatever we put in front of her. She still thinks we hung the moon." A laugh, cold, practiced. Mine. Gasps rippled through the gallery. I felt every one in my teeth. A juror, an older man with grandkids' photos in his wallet, looked at me like I might shatter. I didn't. I'd practiced in the mirror. Chin up, eyes dry. Ernest deserved that much. They tried to spin it. Defense called a toxicologist who mumbled about environmental exposure, claimed the methanol could have come from windshield fluid. Patel countered with the purchase receipt, Henry's credit card, 3:17 a.m., a chemical supply shop 2 towns over. The clerk took the stand, sweating through his shirt, identified Henry from a lineup photo. Said my son paid cash after the card declined, peeled bills from a wad thick as a sandwich. Cross-examination got ugly. Charles's lawyer leaned in, voice syrupy. "Isn't it possible your father's drinking finally caught up with him?" I stood before I realized it. Objection slipped out like a cough. The judge's gavel cracked. "Sit down, ma'am." But Patel was already there, sliding a photo across the projector. Ernest's liver biopsy, taken months earlier. Clean as a whistle. The toxicologist's face went the color of dishwater. Recess tasted like metal. I stepped into the hallway, pressed my back to the cool wall. Henry's lawyer cornered me near the vending machine, offered a plea manslaughter, 15 years. "They're still your sons, Mrs. Hayes." I looked him dead in the eye. My sons died the night they poured poison in their father's glass. Back in session, they played the voicemail Ernest left Carver the day before he died. His voice God, his voice raspy from sawdust and laughter lines. "If I don't make it, tell Viv the shop's hers. Tell her the boys. Tell her I tried to fix what I broke. And Carver? Keep her safe." The courtroom went still. Even Charles's jaw twitched. Closing arguments lasted an hour, but I only remember Patel's last line, "Love doesn't forge dental records. Greed does." Jury was out 4 hours. For hours I spent in the ladies' room, splashing water on my face until the mirror stopped shaking. When they filed back in, the forewoman wouldn't meet my eyes. "Guilty. Both counts. Murder in the first." Charles didn't flinch. Henry folded in half, a sound coming out of him like a kicked dog. Sentencing was set for October. I thought that was the end, justice served, cold and final. I was wrong. 3 weeks later, a guard found Charles in his cell, belt around his neck, feet dangling 6 inches off the floor. No note. Just a Polaroid tucked under his pillow, the four of us at the lake, summer of '89. I'm in a red swimsuit, Ernest's arm around my waist, the boys mid-splash, mouths open in screams of joy. Someone had drawn a thick black X over Ernest's face. I identified the body myself. Same marble features, but the eyes, hollow. Like whatever lived behind them had packed up and left. Henry got the news in the visitation room. I watched through the glass as the guard whispered it. My younger boy, my sensitive one, the one who cried at Old Yeller, curled into himself, rocking. When they led him away, he looked straight at me and mouthed something I couldn't hear. Later, the lip reader on the news said it was, "I'm sorry, Mama." Prison doesn't give you time to grieve one son before it starts eating the other. Henry stopped eating. Stopped talking. By spring, he weighed less than I did at 16. The warden called me in April. Pneumonia. Maybe intentional. I sat by his bed in the infirmary, held his hand while machines beeped slower. He squeezed once, faint as a moth wing. "Tell Dad." His voice was paper. "Tell him the shop's safe." I leaned close, smelled the antiseptic and the boy he used to be. "He knows, baby." He always knew. He slipped away at dawn. I closed his eyes myself. After that, the house on Maplewood felt like a museum of ghosts. I sold it to a young couple with a toddler who chased sunlight across the hardwood. Kept Ernest's shop on Elm Street, the one he'd built from nothing, smelling of cedar shavings and possibility. I turned the back room into a greenhouse. Grow lights humming like lullabies, roses the color of his old flannel shirts pushing through soil I'd sifted with my own hands. Every petal felt like defiance. The insurance money, the very payout they'd killed for, became second dawn. A foundation for widows who wake up to empty chairs and fuller bank accounts than they ever wanted. We meet Thursdays in the shop's loft, drink tea strong enough to stand a spoon in, trade stories that would curl your hair. Some nights I still reach for Ernest's side of the bed, fingers brushing cold sheets. But then the scent of sawdust and rosemary drifts in, and I remember, the casket was empty of him, but never of us. 5 years on, I was kneeling in the dirt, pruning a stubborn sage plant, when my phone buzzed. Same number, Carver's. My heart stuttered, old habits dying hard. New case. Another wife, another set of sons. Need your eyes, Viv. You in? I wiped my hands on my apron, felt the ache in my knees and the steel in my spine, and typed back, on my way. But before I locked up the shop, I paused at the workbench where Ernest used to carve tiny boats for the boys. There, half hidden under sawdust, was something new, a small wooden box, lid carved with my initials. I'd never seen it before. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside, a single flash drive and a note in Ernest's handwriting, shaky but unmistakable. "For when you're ready, Viv. The whole truth. Burn after listening." I stared at it until the grow lights flickered off, plunging the room into darkness. Whatever was on that drive, it wasn't over. Not yet. The flash drive felt heavier than a brick in my palm, like it carried every secret Ernest never got to whisper in my ear. I stood there in the dim shop, grow lights clicking off one by one until the only glow came from the street lamp bleeding through the front window. My thumb traced the carved initials on the box, VH, the way I used to trace the laugh lines around his eyes. I should have waited for morning. Should have called Carver, Sergeant Ruiz, anyone with a badge and a steady voice. But the note said, "When you're ready," and 5 years of planting roses in blood-soaked dirt had taught me something. Ready doesn't knock. It kicks the door down. I locked up, drove home with the wooden box on the passenger seat like a sleeping child. The cottage I'd bought after the sale, tiny, cedar-shingled, perched on the edge of town, felt too quiet. I brewed chamomile I didn't drink, plugged the drive into my laptop, and hit play before courage could talk me out of it. Ernest's voice filled the room, crackly but alive, dated 3 days before the crash. "Viv, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. And if the boys did what I think. God, I'm sorry. I saw it coming, love." The way they looked at the shop, at the policies, at you, like you were line items on a balance sheet. A pause. I heard the clink of ice in a glass, his whiskey, the one that killed him. My throat closed. There's more. Wasn't just greed. Charles, He's in deep with some people downtown. Loan sharks, the kind who don't send letters. They leaned on him, threatened the condo, the cars, everything. Henry tried to cover it, moved money from the shop to keep them off. But it wasn't enough. They wanted the insurance. All of it. The recording skipped, like he leaned too close to the mic. I paid Carver to dig, but I dug too. Found emails, Charles promising a cut to a man named Rook. Goes by one name, runs a private equity front that's dirtier than a mechanic's rag. They staged the crash, yeah, but Rook's the one who supplied the John Doe. Pulled him from a freezer like a side of beef. I paused it, hand over my mouth. Rook. The name tasted like rust. Ernest kept talking about forged signatures, offshore accounts, a safety deposit box in both our names at First National. He taped under the workbench in the shop, behind the old lathe. Everything's there, Viv. Enough to burn them all if it comes to it. But only if you want the smoke. The file ended with a sound I hadn't heard in years, his chuckle, low and warm. Plant something that bites back, would you? Love you forever. I sat in the dark until the laptop battery died, then drove back to the shop with dawn just bruising the sky. The key was where he said, taped so flush I'd swept over it 1,000 times. My fingers left prints in the sawdust. First National opened at 9. I was first in line, box key cold against my palm. The clerk, a kid with a name tag reading Jaden, led me to the vault like I was royalty. The box was heavier than expected. Inside, stacks of documents, a second flash drive, and a photo of Charles shaking hands with a man in a charcoal suit. Rook. Scar bisecting his left eyebrow like a lightning bolt. Back home, I spread it all across the kitchen table. Emails timestamped months before Ernest's death, Charles begging for extensions, Henry pleading Dad can't know. Transfer records showing shop funds funneled to a shell company called Peregrine LLC. And the kicker, a life insurance rider taken out on me, beneficiary listed as Peregrine, signed with my own looping signature. Forged so perfectly, I had to compare it to my grocery list to spot the difference. My phone buzzed. Carver. You get my text? Wife's sons just skipped bail. Headed your way. I hadn't seen any text. I'd been too busy digging up bones. I called him back, voice steadier than I felt. Ernest left more. A lot more. Meet me at the shop. He was there in 20, trench coat damp from the drizzle that had followed me all morning. I laid it out, recordings, documents, the photo. His eyes narrowed at Rook's face. Rook's a ghost, he muttered. Feds have been after him for years, insurance scams, bodies in freezers, you name it. If Charles and Henry were his puppets, then the strings are still twitching. I tapped the forged policy. They wanted me gone too. And if Rook thinks I have this, I swept a hand over the table. He'll send someone to tie up loose ends. Carver pulled a pistol from his coat, checked the chamber like it was habit. We go to Ruiz. Now. But as we stepped onto the porch, tires crunched gravel out front. A black SUV, tinted windows, no plates. It idled for a beat, 2 heartbeats, then peeled away, leaving only the smell of exhaust and danger. Inside, my laptop chimed. New email. No subject. Attachment. A single photo. Me, kneeling in the shop's greenhouse yesterday, pruning rosemary. Taken from the skylight. Caption. Pretty flowers. Shame if they burned. I looked at Carver. He looked at me. Call Ruiz, I said. Then we're paying Rook a visit. Because some weeds don't die when you pull them. Sometimes you've got to salt the earth. And I still had Ernest's lighter in my pocket, the one he used to start the grill every 4th of July. The rain had turned to mist by the time Carver and I rolled past the city limits, wipers whispering secrets across the windshield. He drove. I sat shotgun with Ernest's lighter clicking open and shut in my lap like a nervous heartbeat. The photo of me in the greenhouse was still open on my phone, that caption glowing like a coal. Pretty flowers. Shame if they burned. We weren't heading to Ruiz yet. First stop, the address tied to Peregrine LLC, a glass tower downtown that looked like it ate smaller buildings for breakfast. Carver had pulled it from the shell company filings while I packed a go-bag just in case the cottage went up in smoke before supper. The lobby smelled of money and eucalyptus. Security eyed us like we'd tracked in mud. Carver flashed a PI license older than the guard's acne and asked for Mr. Rook, urgent delivery. The kid hesitated, then buzzed us up to the 32nd floor. Elevator music tried to soothe us with violins. I stared at our reflection, Carver in his rumpled coat, me in jeans, and the flannel Ernest wore the day he proposed. 66 going on immortal. Doors slid open onto a hallway carpeted, so thick it swallowed sound. A receptionist with a smile sharp as stilettos greeted us. Mr. Rook is in a meeting. Tell him Viv Hayes is here about her greenhouse, I cut in, voice steady enough to slice bread. And the 2 sons he turned into murderers. Her smile faltered. She picked up the phone. 30 seconds later, a door at the end of the hall opened. Rook stepped out, charcoal suit, scar catching the light like a warning. Up close he smelled of cedar and something metallic. His eyes flicked over me, calculating. Mrs. Hayes. Smooth as spilled oil. Heard you've been digging in the wrong dirt. I held up the photo from the safety deposit box, him shaking Charles's hand. Recognize your puppet? His smirk didn't waver. Walk with me. He led us into an office big enough to host weddings. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city glittering below like broken promises. On the desk, a single red rose in a crystal vase. My stomach turned. Sentiment? I asked. Reminder. He lifted the rose, twirled it. Everything beautiful can be cut. Carver shifted beside me, hand near his coat pocket. I gave a tiny shake of my head. Not yet. Rook leaned against the desk. Your boys owed me $2 million. Interest compounds, Mrs. Hayes. They thought insurance was cleaner than bankruptcy. I simply facilitated. You supplied the body, I said. Swapped the dental records. Poisoned my husband. Details. He shrugged. They pulled the trigger. I just loaded the gun. I stepped closer, close enough to see the scar twitch. And the policy on me? That your idea too. Insurance is insurance. His eyes flicked to the rose again. But you're here, alive. That's inconvenient. Carver's voice rumbled low. Feds are convening a task force. Your name's on the whiteboard, Rook. In red. For the first time, something flickered behind Rook's eyes. Not fear, annoyance. Like we were a line item running over budget. He pressed a button on his desk. The door behind us locked with a soft click. Then let's renegotiate. 2 men stepped from a side door, big, silent, knuckles like walnuts. Carver tensed. I felt the lighter in my pocket, warm from my grip. Rook smiled. The rose is wired, by the way. C4 in the vase. One wrong move and this floor becomes a crater. Your choice, Mrs. Hayes. Walk away, burn the files, let the past fertilize someone else's garden. Or, he didn't finish. Didn't need to. I looked at the rose. At the city 32 floors down. At Carver's steady eyes. Then I did the last thing Rook expected. I laughed. Not the polite chuckle of a grieving widow. A full, belly-deep laugh that echoed off the glass. You think I came here to bargain? I wiped my eyes. I came to watch you sweat. I pulled the lighter, flicked it open. Flame danced, small but hungry. Rook's smirk vanished. Put that down. Make me. The goons moved. Carver met the first with an elbow to the throat. The second lunged at me. I sidestepped 66 years of dodging Ernest's sawdust tantrums, and the man crashed into the desk. The vase toppled. Rose and all. Time slowed. The vase hit the carpet, didn't explode from the carpet, didn't explode. Rook's face went the color of ash. I held up the lighter. Ernest taught me a trick. Real C4 needs a detonator. This? I tapped the vase with my shoe. Just a pretty prop. Like you. Carver had the second goon in a chokehold. Sirens wailed below Ruiz, right on cue. I'd texted her from the elevator. 32nd floor. Bring friends. Rook lunged for a drawer. I was faster, grabbed the rose, thorns biting my palm, and pressed the lighter's flame to the petals. They curled, blackened, filled the room with the smell of burnt sugar. Everything beautiful can be cut, I said. But some of us grow back pricklier. Cuffs snapped on Rook before the smoke cleared. The goons sang like canaries, locations, accounts, the freezer where the real John Doe had waited. Turned out Charles and Henry weren't the only puppets. Ruiz found me in the lobby later, ash still on my fingers. You okay, Viv? I looked at the blackened rose in my hand, then at the skyline. I'm just getting started. Back at the shop that night, I planted the charred petals in fresh soil under the grow lights. By morning, tiny green shoots pushed through, like they'd been waiting for permission. Carver called a week later. Rook's talking. Feds want you to testify. Could take months. I was pruning basil, the scent sharp and alive. Tell them I'll bring cookies. He laughed. You're something else, Viv. I hung up, watered the new shoots, and felt Ernest's chuckle in the hum of the lights. Truth isn't a grave you dig once and walk away from. It's a garden. You tend it, day after day, until the thorns are yours and the blooms are too. And somewhere in the city, another wife is getting a text she'll never forget. I'll be there when she needs a hand to hold and a match to strike. The rose sat in a mason jar on my kitchen windowsill for 3 days, red as a fresh bruise, thorns still stuck in the stem like it was holding on for dear life. I watered it every morning, same as the tomatoes, same as the widows who came to Second Dawn looking for soil to put their grief in. It didn't wilt, didn't bloom wider, just stared back at me, daring me to blink first. On the 4th morning, the knock came before coffee. 3 sharp raps, the kind that say I know you're in there. I opened the door to a woman I'd never seen, mid-40s, hair the color of wet sand, eyes older than her skin. She clutched a manila envelope like it might bite. Viv Hayes. Her voice cracked on my name. That's me, sugar. Come in before the cold steals your knees. She stepped inside, boots leaving little crescents of mud on my rug. I poured tea chamomile with a whisper of honey and waited. Folks don't show up at dawn with envelopes full of sunshine. My name's Mara, she said finally. Mara Ellison. My husband. They say he died in a boating accident last spring. But yesterday I got this. She slid the envelope across the table. Inside, a single flash drive and a note in handwriting that made my heart stutter. Ernest's handwriting. Play it when you're ready, Mara. Then find Viv. She'll know what to do. I stared until the words blurred. How? I don't know. Mara's hands shook. The postmark's local. No return address. I thought it was a cruel joke until I listened. She didn't need to say more. I saw it in her eyes, the same hollow Ernest's had when he started locking the shop at night. The same hollow I'd worn for months after the casket. I plugged the drive into my laptop. A video popped up grainy, time-stamped 6 months before Mara's husband drowned. A man's voice, familiar in the way nightmares are. If you're watching, Mara, I'm sorry. The accident wasn't. They needed the insurance. Rook's people, they're still out there. Cleaning up. Tell Viv, the garden's bigger than we thought. The screen went black. Mara was crying without sound, tears sliding into her collar. I closed the laptop. Your husband worked with Ernest? She nodded. Same firm, years ago. Before Rook bought it out. They stayed friends. Golfed on Sundays. I looked at the rose on the windowsill. At the thorn. At the woman across from me who'd just had her world cracked open like a seed. How many more? I whispered. Mara wiped her face. I don't know. But the note said you'd help. I stood, knees creaking like old floorboards, and went to the junk drawer. Pulled out Ernest's lighter, the one that had bluffed Rook into sweating. Then the wooden box from the shop, still smelling of cedar and secrets. I set them both in front of Mara. First rule of gardening, I said. You don't fight the weeds alone. She looked at the lighter, at the box, at me. Something shifted in her eyes, grief making room for grit. What's the second rule? I smiled, the kind that starts in your toes and ends in your teeth. Some flowers only bloom after a fire. We started that morning. Mara moved into the cottage's spare room. We turned the shop loft into War Room Central, whiteboards, timelines, burner phones. Carver brought coffee and a Fed contact who owed him favors. Ruiz stopped by after shifts, badge off, sleeves rolled, ready to dig. The flash drive had more than a message. Coordinates. Account numbers. Names 7 of them, all accidents in the last 2 years. All insured by companies Rook had touched before the feds locked him up. All widows who thought they were alone. We found the first one in a nursing home 2 towns over, convinced her stroke husband had just forgotten to tie his shoes one too many times. The second ran a bakery, still needing dough at 3 a.m. because sleep brought water. By the end of the month, Second Dawn had a new wing, not just support, but search and scorch. Winter came early. Snow dusted the greenhouse roof while we worked. Mara learned to spot forged signatures faster than I could. Lena, the young widow I'd hired, taught us how to trace shell companies through bakery receipts. We laughed over tea, cried over files, planted rosemary in every pot like it was armor. One night in February, the knock came again. Same 3 raps. I opened the door to a man in a dark coat, face half hidden by a scarf. He held a red rose fresh, thorn intact. "Message for Viv," he rasped. "From an old friend." I took the rose. He was gone before the porch light caught his eyes. Inside the stem, a micro SD card, taped tight. I plugged it in with Mara breathing down my neck. Rook's voice, tinny, recorded in what sounded like a bathroom. "They think I'm done. But roots run deep, Viv. Deeper than prisons. Tell your garden. I'm coming to prune." Static. Then a woman's scream, cut short. Mara's hand found mine. "He's out. Or someone's wearing his mask." I looked at the rose, at the card, at the army of widows sleeping in the next room. "Doesn't matter." I stood, lighter in one hand, Ernest's box in the other. "Tomorrow," I said, "we stop waiting for the fire." We struck first. Spring found us in a warehouse on the river, dawn painting the water gold. 12 widows, 3 feds, one very surprised ex-con who'd been hired to deliver another rose. We had warrants, wiretaps, and a greenhouse full of evidence that bloomed brighter than any flower. Rook's network cracked like thin ice. Arrests rippled outward, accountants, coroners, a judge who golfed with the wrong people. The screams on the recording? A warning, not a memory. We saved her 2 states over, pulled her from a boating accident that never happened. By summer, Second Dawn wasn't a foundation anymore. It was a forest. I turned 71 on a Tuesday. The widows threw a party in the shop, cake with rosemary frosting, champagne in teacups. Mara gave a toast that made Carver blush. Lena danced with Ruiz to an old jazz record Ernest used to play. I stepped outside at dusk, the air thick with lilac and possibility. The cottage porch light glowed steady. In the garden, new roses pushed through soil, red, yes, but edged with white. Hybrids. Stronger. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Ernest's voice, impossible, warm, alive in a way no recording could fake. "Proud of you, Viv. The garden's beautiful. Keep tending it." I looked up. The first star winked, bright as a promise. I smiled, pressed the phone to my heart, and whispered to the night. "Always, love. Always." If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories with Viv. "Oh, honey, you want to know about me? Well, pull up a chair, grab a cup of tea, and let Auntie Viv tell you a little something. I wasn't always this calm, this collected. Oh no, once upon a time, I was a storm in heels. Sharp tongue, soft heart, always thinking I could fix the whole world if I just tried hard enough. Life taught me otherwise. It taught me that some people don't want saving, and that's all right. You save yourself first, and the rest, they'll follow if they're meant to. I grew up in a tiny town where gossip traveled faster than the wind. My mama used to say, Viv, you talk too much, but you listen just enough. And that's probably why I ended up telling stories. Because stories, real ones, messy ones, they remind us we're all human. I've loved deeply. lost painfully. And yes, I've made mistakes that still whisper in my ear when the night gets quiet. But here's the truth I learned after 60 years of heartbreak and laughter. Nothing you go through is wasted. Not a tear, not a regret, not a moment of foolish hope. Everything you survive becomes part of your voice, the one someone else out there needs to hear. That's why I tell stories now, because I know what it's like to sit in the dark, wondering if anyone's ever felt what you're feeling. And then you hear a story, and suddenly, you're not alone anymore. People tell me my voice is comforting. Maybe that's because it's cracked in all the right places. Life will do that, it'll break you open. But it also lets the light in through the cracks. So when I speak, I don't polish the truth. I let it be raw, real, a little tender around the edges. I've seen cruelty dressed as love and kindness come from strangers who had nothing to gain. I've learned that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's choosing peace over poison. And I've learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without bleeding. Now, at my age, I don't chase much. Not perfection, not approval. I chase peace and good stories. The kind that make you feel something in your chest. The kind that make you close your eyes and whisper yes. I've been there too. So when you listen to me, whether it's heartbreak or hope, just know I'm not talking at you. I'm talking with you. We're walking through these stories together, hand in hand, step by step. And if my voice ever reaches you on a hard day, I hope it reminds you you've survived every worst day so far. You're still here, darling. Still breathing. Still becoming. And that's worth every story I've ever told.